All right, welcome to
He said,
She Said with Myckelle Williams and
Dr. Andre Blaylock.
and we are here to bridge the gap between the sexes with real talk.
At least try to.
At least try. We're going to do our best.
Yeah.
So we're talking today about fantasies.
Yeah.
So a lot of people say they want to be in a relationship where you can be open to express your fantasies with your partner and say, hey, I just want to let you know what's on my mind and be vulnerable and tell you how I feel and things I want to do in and out of the bedroom. But can your partner handle your fantasies? Is it too much to handle, too hot to handle?
I think it is, especially in this today's dating climate. You never know what people are exposed to, right?
True.
So when you and I get together in the beginning, we might have that conversation. I might be into this and you're into that. And we both say that sucking each other's toes are off limits. But 5, 6, 7 years into the relationship, I start watching toe sucking videos. And I start listening to my friends who suck toes. And I'm like, I might want my toes sucked a little bit. But I'm thinking about, I can't have that conversation with you because we already agreed years ago that we're not into that.
Right.
So it takes me a lot of courage to even bring that up to you, right?
Okay.
But if you just automatically say no because you're stuck, that opens up a whole nother avenue of exploration potentially, because I want my toes sucked now.
So does that give you the right to go out and get somebody else sucking your toes or what?
We're not going to say it gives you the right, but it does create the impetus or the motivation to get it done.
But what if it's a matter of a third person in the bedroom? You got a lot of people who say, hey, my fantasy is having a threesome, or my fantasy is doing something outrageous.
Right.
Now, let's say if it's a bigger fantasy that person may not be comfortable with, or even if they are. And I don't think that men are necessarily more comfortable with this. They say they are. Like if a woman goes, hey, I've thought about having a threesome.
Got to be with another chick.
So what happens if she goes, my fantasy, what if she says, my fantasy is 2 men plus you, let's go.
All right. I will be in agreement with that if he's a midget.
Both of them? All 3 of them?
No, I'm going to be involved, so it's me and the midget. You get to have the
But
fantasy.
why?
Because you can't have it all. You can have anything you want. You just can't have everything you want. So you're getting your threesome.
I think you guys say, I want a woman to express her fantasies and really be open. But if she says, hey, I want you plus 2 other men, how would you react?
Well, then we're going to say that's whole behavior.
That's wrong, because you're saying you want your partner to express your fantasies, right?
No, I'm not saying that. I think some things shouldn't be, just because you think it, you shouldn't say it. And there are too many things. You should know your partner, right? You should know who you hooked up with. You know pretty much what their lines in the sand are. And if you develop fantasies that you know are going to send them off the deep end, that might
How do you develop fantasies? Sometimes those are things that you just enjoy or you just naturally are drawn to.
That's developing, right? You take a picture like a Kodak. We old enough to remember. You take the Polaroid, then it develops over time, right?
Right.
It might have been an interest or inkling in your imagination years ago, but it came to fruition in this relationship now.
But should you not feel free to express that to your partner because you're afraid that they're going to be like, oh, this makes me look at you negative now?
Well, you can feel free to do anything you want to, but you just got to accept the consequences of that freedom.
Well, how does this help us to be vulnerable in our relationships? Because our goal with this show is to show people how to be vulnerable with our relationships. So how can you be more vulnerable if you're afraid to express the deepest, darkest parts of your mind with your partner?
A lot of this comes from how the relationship starts out in the beginning, right? We do not establish friendships in the beginning. You can be vulnerable with your friend. That ain't with most girlfriend, boyfriends, committed relationships, husband and wives. The friendship is not strong enough.
Yeah, because I've even seen situations where you tell your partner's deep, dark secrets and they throw it in your face.
Absolutely. Women to do that. It's, men to do it too, but women, when she gets scorned.
So what about those instances when you see couples who you tell someone your deepest, darkest secrets, but they throw it in your face? They use it against you later on.
Well, I mean, I think they've shown a penchant for pettiness in the beginning. When you really like someone, you start ignoring things. You know this problem, but you're like, you know what, I can change them, or it's not going to be towards me. But you mess around and tell a petty person your problems, they will throw it up in your face later on.
And I've noticed that women, we have a love of wanting to change people, or kind of seeing the best in them, or saying, I see potential here.
I'm always say, look, it's not a problem. If you don't like me, it doesn't matter what I do to you.
Yeah.
But when you start liking me, that's when it becomes a problem.
How do we get to a place where we're able to be vulnerable with our partner and able to allow them to see the things that we desire or our fantasies without it being an issue down the road?
I think that during the dating process, and let me first define what dating is. Dating is getting to know a person, learning new things about yourself, potentially around activities that you enjoy. Right?
So Netflix and chill is not dating?
Not really. Can be, kind of. If you can approach it from a friendship perspective and get to know a person without becoming emotionally attached prematurely, you will see some of those things.
Yeah.
And then once you learn your partner, I think that you can bridge the gap by not expecting something that might be outside of someone's bandwidth.
Well, let me ask you this. There's a lot of people who pretend to be one way when they're actually not that way. So you're trying to get to know them, but they're putting on a mask and they're becoming the person that they think you want to see. How do we get to that state of being able to reach that level in our relationships where we do see who that person truly is?
Well, if it's centered around activities and doing things that you like, I think over time it's exposed. The issue is when you start liking or disliking a person. Either one of those states, you're not going to see them clearly, right? So I think you bridge the gap by really establishing friendship first. And if they try to do romantic stuff up front, you don't have to accept it.
And I think so many times we tend to push relationships so quickly because we're like, oh, I don't want to be alone, or I'm lonely. So we look at the we look through the rose-colored glasses and we're like, this person, he said he's wonderful. He loves his family. He loves his kids. He does this and that. But you're really not looking into the deeper picture. And
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about vulnerability and transparency, I think it's important to really, really know that person before you feel comfortable to share those things with them.
Absolutely.
Because you'll know when it's the right time to share those things.
Exactly. And you can watch how they treat their family, their friends, their associates over time. They're going to tell you who they are. It's not how they're treating you in the moment, because if I'm a man, I might want some booty.
That is hard, especially if you're attracted to the person, because there's a lot of times where you'll have those feelings. You'll think, oh, I really like this person. So you push the relationship farther than it should have been.
Right.
So then later you have these issues and you're like, I don't know what happened. But a lot of times that's what happened. You took those steps before it was, time to take those steps.
Right. See, she loses a lot of friends because she likes us to dress like her.
What do you guys think, though? Because our opinion, I said certain things about fantasies. I think you should be able to open up to your partner and tell them your fantasies, but I also think it's a tricky situation because I think that person could throw it and use it against you, or it could be too much. Can you handle the truth?
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with her, but I think, again, that just because you think it or want it, you have to know the bandwidth of your partner who you deal with, because Tyrone crazy.
And you want to be able to be vulnerable, but be cautious. You don't have to say everything. Some things you can keep deep inside.
That part.
So you guys tell us what you think. Do you think that you should be able to open up and be vulnerable with your partner and transparent in every way? Or do you think that's something you should keep on the down low and maybe just keep your fantasies to yourself? Sound off below with He Said, She Said.
Peace. See you next time.
Bye.